Episode 196 of the Read to Lead podcast is brought to you in part by cloud accounting software FreshBooks and by Gusto. FreshBooks offering a free 30-day trial with access to all their features. To find out more, visit freshbooks.com/read-to-lead. Gusto is refreshingly easy payroll, benefits, and HR for the modern small business. Currently offering an exclusive limited-time deal. Sign up today and get 3 months free once you run your first payroll. Just go to gusto.com/read-to-lead.
Every goal is a project, but not every project is a goal. And one of the major distinctions for it to be a goal is that it's got to be exciting to you.
Welcome to the Read to Lead podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Brown, and I believe that if you desire to achieve true success in business and in life, that intentional and consistent reading is a must. The Read to Lead podcast will not only help you narrow this ever-important reading list, but bring you key ideas and valuable insights from some of today's most successful and inspiring authors. As we kick off a brand new year, I can't think of a better person to start off the year with than Michael Hyatt. He's the author of Your Best Year Ever, a 5-step plan for helping you achieve your most important goals. And in my experience, there's nobody better at this. I'll be asking Michael to share what makes his book different than the hundreds of others out there on the topic. We'll dive into his smarter goal-setting framework and improvement on the well-known SMART version. And of course, we'll discuss his 5-step plan and much, much more. You know, if you're a freelancer or a small business owner, I feel for you. I am too. Tax season is here, and there's a good chance that you're trying to dig your way out from underneath a pile of receipts and spreadsheets. Do yourself a favor and stop digging before you completely disappear under the abyss of paperwork. Go and check out FreshBooks cloud accounting software. Not only is it going to save you a ton of time and stress, it might actually change the way you feel about dealing with your taxes. It certainly did for me. Got to send your accountant a quick summary on the amount of tax you've collected last year. How about pulling together a profit and loss summary? FreshBooks can generate these reports in seconds instead of the hours it would take you to do them manually. And boy, is that a time saver for me, I can tell you. FreshBooks is offering a 30-day unrestricted free trial to you as a listener to the show. To claim it, just go to freshbooks.com/read-to-lead and enter Read to Lead in the How Did You Hear About Us section. You heard me mention them at the top of the show. I am excited to welcome new sponsor Gusto to the Read to Lead podcast. They are a refreshingly easy payroll, benefits, and HR solution for the modern small business. You know, payroll and benefits are hard, right? Especially when you're a small business. You don't have time to be an expert in things like taxes and regulations, certainly not me. And old school payroll providers just aren't built the way you work today. Well, much like FreshBooks does for accounting, Gusto is making payroll, benefits, and HR easy for small businesses. Modern technology does the heavy lifting, so it's easy for you to get it right. You no longer have to be a big company to get great technology, great benefits, and great service from your team. As a supporter of Read to Lead, Gusto is offering you an exclusive limited time deal. You can sign up today and you'll get 3 months free once you run your first payroll. That's 3 months free once you run your first payroll. Just go to gusto.com/read-to-lead to find out more. Again, that's gusto.com/read-to-lead. Michael Hyatt is the founder and CEO of Michael Hyatt and Company, a leadership development company dedicated to helping high achievers win at work and succeed at life. He's the former chairman and CEO of Thomas Nelson Publishers and also the author of the USA Today bestseller Living Forward, co-authored with Daniel Harkavy, who we've had on the show before, and the New York Times bestseller Platform, Get Noticed in a Noisy World. His blog, michaelhyatt.com, is ranked by Google in the top 0.5% of all blogs, with more than 1 million page views a month. And he's been featured in such publications as the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Fast Company, Inc., and Entrepreneur. Michael is also the creator of several online courses, including 5 Days to Your Best Year Ever and Free to Focus, and the online community Platform University. But most important to Michael, though, is his family. He and his wife, Gail, have been married for 39 years. They have 5 daughters, 3 sons-in-law, and 8 grandchildren. Well, to say it's a delight to have you here, Michael, sort of feels like the understatement of all understatements.
Well, thanks, Jeff. Great to be with you.
I've bought in. I've bought the books. I've bought the courses. More recently, I've bought the physical products and, of course, enjoy your free content every day. I'm a much better human, I think, as a result. And so I not only want to say thank you for being here, but just simply thank you.
Well, thanks. That means the world to me.
Well, as I mentioned, you sell a course that walks people through this plan, which is a little more lucrative than a book. So to me, that kind of begs the question, why put it out in this form? Were you not worried it might cannibalize things like course sales, or was it simply a matter of, I need to get this into the hands of as many people as I can?
Well, I think it was mostly the latter. People learn in all kinds of different ways. Some people want to go through a course. Some people want to listen to a podcast. Some people want to read a book. And I really want to get the message out in as many ways as possible. And I kind of think of the book is almost like the textbook. The course is like enrolling in the course where you're going to be held accountable and you're going to be going in at a deeper level with the focus on implementation. And that's really what the focus is now. And of course, we're in the midst of this launch of the course right now, and we're ahead of where we hope to be. So it's definitely not cannibalizing sales.
Well, there are, as you mentioned in the book, Michael, 100 or so books, maybe more on this topic. How then does your book stand apart? What are you teaching, in other words, quote unquote, right, that maybe other books get wrong?
Well, certainly I've stood, on the shoulders of giants, people like Zig Ziglar that have written and talked about goal setting for years. And I had the privilege of publishing Zig when I was at Thomas Nelson Publishers. And so, I have utmost respect for people that have gone before. But I think part of the answer is that this is a total integrated system. So it walks you from dream to completion with a proven methodology to overcome all the hurdles along the way. And it really comes from my own personal goal setting practice and goal achievement practice over decades. It also comes from our 25,000 plus now students who have been through 5 days to your best year ever. We launched that course in 2012. And of course, I've learned as much from my students, I feel like, as they've learned from me. So there were a lot of things at the beginning that I thought made sense. They worked for me, but I put them in the larger context of a larger community and found out that some things didn't work quite so well. Other things worked much better. And the research, of course, along the way has corrected us. And I think this is one of the few courses and one of the few books out there that's really based on research and not just kind of one person's experience or kind of the hearsay or the common wisdom.
Certainly would back that up as somebody who's walked through it a couple of times myself. I want to get into some of the steps if we can. Step one is what Michael calls the believe the possibility step. It deals with how our beliefs shape our reality and how they often hold us back, but it's possible, Michael says, to upgrade our beliefs. So what might that process look like, Michael?
Well, I think it's important for people to understand what a limiting belief is. And these shape our reality and our perception of reality more than any single thing, I think. You've probably heard me tell this story since you've listened to so much of my stuff. But I used to have this English setter named Nelson. And I named him after Thomas Nelson because I was the CEO there for a while. And I thought that'd be kind of cute. But at any rate, a great dog. But he's a little bit nervous. And when the front door would open, he'd bolt out of that front door, just kind of like a convict escaping from jail. And so we'd spend the next 30 minutes, 45 minutes trying to track him down. And we were scared to death that he was going to dart into the middle of the busy street in front of our house. So then we discovered invisible fence. Now, this is amazing because you bury this wire around the perimeter of your yard. And we didn't have a fence at the time. We do now, but we didn't at the time. And then you put a little collar on the dog and turn it on. And when the dog approaches that barrier, that wire, they get a little bit of a vibration. And it's just enough to startle them and stop them dead in their tracks. Well, Nelson got so accustomed to that we literally could take the collar off and it didn't make any difference in his behavior. He still would not transgress that boundary, even if we stood on the other side of it with treats. Even if I put my grandkids on the other side of it with treats, he still would stay in the yard. And what had happened is that boundary, that invisible boundary, had moved from the external world to the internal world between his ears. And that happens for a lot of us. We go through some disappointment, some setback, or maybe we're just listening to the news media or spending too much time on social media or the family that we grew up with, whatever. We get these limiting beliefs that really don't exist out there. They really only exist in the internal world of our thinking. And one of the things, if we're going to really grow and make progress, is we've got to learn to question those beliefs and make sure that they serve us if we're going to be able to move on.
Well, the next step, completing the past, I think you call it, is something I think most people dread. I have to think about the past? So you say it's a must. So talk about what completing the past means, if you would, and why it's so important.
Well, I think there's probably two kinds of people. There's some people that are so stuck in the past they can't move beyond it. You know, we've all come across our Facebook friends from high school that are, still living back when, they were the quarterback of the football team or the homecoming queen or whatever it was. But they're stuck in the past and they just can't move beyond it. Or maybe they had a setback that's keeping them stuck. On the other hand, there are people that want to deny the past, but because they haven't reached closure on it, it bites them in a bad way. And I don't want people to drag the worst of their past into the best of their future. So the past is a great storehouse of learning, storehouse of lessons, if we know how to distill the essence of it and learn from it. So I want people to be able to face their past, to be able to distill the lessons from it so that it doesn't inhibit their ability to go forward, but it gives them the strength and the confidence that they can move past their past and experience a new kind of future. There's also this concept that regret reveals opportunity. And this was really an interesting insight from the research that we did. There were two researchers from the University of Illinois who ranked people's biggest regrets in life. And what they discovered was, and this is a quote from the study, they said, feelings of dissatisfaction and disappointment are strongest where the chance for corrective reaction are clearest. So in other words, they call this the opportunity principle, but it's this idea that regret doesn't have to be a roadblock. It can actually be viewed as a road sign leading us to the future. So we can think about what we regret from this past year. Maybe you didn't spend enough time with your spouse, or maybe you didn't spend enough time in your business in planning or budgeting or whatever it is. But that's an indicator, if you'll let it be one, of what could actually be an enormous opportunity as you go forward. And it reveals that we care about that thing. And caring about it is incredibly important to actually achieving it.
Well, this portion on regret was really eye-opening for me to read. I thought regret was supposed to be avoided at all costs.
Right.
I love the quote in the book, the only people with no hope are those with no regrets. It kind of turns that on its head. Related to that, Michael, is gratitude. What are some ways you try to practice gratitude on a daily basis?
Man, I think gratitude is so important. Let me just say this. The reason it's important when it comes to goal setting is you're never going to get more of what you want until you're thankful for what you've got. And I think for a lot of people, we've fallen into sort of this consumeristic mindset where we're so future focused, we don't stop to say thank you. And it's out of that place of abundance that we do our best planning. If we come at it from a position of scarcity and we're desperate to accomplish these goals, then my experience and a lot of the experience of my students is that they just don't make the progress. It's just, for whatever reason, that motive just doesn't serve us well. So gratitude is essentially an attitude that enables us to shift into that mindset of abundance. And so for me, it's pretty simple. It's not really a big deal, but it's something I do on a daily basis. Like I start and end the day with prayer. I'm grateful, not just in a generic sense, but I'm grateful to someone. I happen to be a believer in God and a follower of Jesus. And so that's where my prayer begins and ends. And I really practice thankfulness. So it's not just about knocking on the door of the cosmic vending machine and asking for more stuff. But it's being thankful for all the little things and the big things too. And one practice that I have also is that I journal every day. I've only been doing this for about 7 years. My wife got me into it. But one of the things I ask every single day and answer in my journal, I've got 8 questions that I go through that kind of prompt me when I'm a little bit sleepy and trying to journal. But one of those is, what am I thankful for? And I always write down at least 3 things that I'm thankful for. And then finally, and we've had this practice for decades, my children are all grown now, but we do it when they come back home and when the grandkids come over, and around the table, we'll just ask one another, what was your best thing today? And it's just a way to focus on the good things that happen, because every day has some things that are good, some things that are bad, but we have the choice in terms of what we're going to focus on. And so we've just encouraged our kids and encouraged ourselves to focus on the good things that happen and be thankful for those.
So not just on the third Thursday in November every year, in other words.
No, that's right. Yeah, it's Thanksgiving every single night. We did it last night. My brother-in-law came in, and he knows the drill by now because he's with us every Christmas. And so we went through the drill again last night.
Well, I think pretty much everybody is familiar with the SMART goal-setting framework, but I've long been a fan of your modified version. You've not just added a couple letters, but you've also made at least one significant change to the existing framework. Would you be willing to walk through that?
Sure. So SMART is an acronym. And as you said, almost all of us have heard of SMART goals, and I've tried to inform this with the latest research, but your goals need to be specific. That's the S in smarter, and that's not a new idea. But, few people actually do that to get something really specific. Like, let's say your goal is to write a book this year. Well, which book? How long is it going to be? When are you going to have it done by? It's got to be specific. Then it needs to be measurable. If you have a weight loss goal, for example, it's much better to actually focus on a number that you're trying to achieve, or you're trying to build your business and raise your revenue. Well, how much are you trying to do? How are you going to know if you achieve the goal unless you make it measurable? And that's the M. Then the A stands for actionable. Every good goal needs to start with a verb, and it needs to be an action verb. Why? Because you can't take action on a to-be verb. So, for example, if I say I want to be more consistent in blogging, that's a to-be verb. How will I know if I'm more consistent? Much better to say something like, write a blog post 3 times a week. That's specific, it's measurable, and it's actionable. And that's the A in the acronym. The R, and this is, I think, the one you're probably referring to, the one where I depart from the conventional model, is that it doesn't need to be realistic. Realism is kind of for sissies. I hate to say that. But I like goals that are risky. And we can talk about this in a minute if you want, when we talk about sort of the 3 places where a goal needs to be or could be. But goal needs to be, there needs to be a little bit of risk. It needs to produce a little bit of fear, but also excitement. And I can talk about the science behind that in a minute. Then it needs to be time keyed. And by that, I mean, if it's an achievement goal, it needs to have a deadline on it. Because without a deadline, I think Dave Ramsey said this, it's just a dream. But with a habit goal, which is a slightly different kind of goal, there's other kinds of time keys too, like when do you want to start it? How long do you want to go for? When in the day do you want to observe it, and so forth? And then the E is for exciting. If the goal doesn't get you excited, Jeff, why are you pursuing it?
Right.
And we had somebody, one of our students in the private Facebook group, who said, I'm really having a hard time making progress on this goal, and I just seem to be stuck. So I said, okay, so what's the goal? She said, well, I want to get my accounting reconciled, and I just can't get in motion. I said, well, are you excited about getting your accounting reconciled? She said, heck no, I'm not excited about it at all. And I said, well, that's probably a project, but it's not a goal. Every goal is a project, but not every project is a goal. And one of the major distinctions for it to be a goal is that it's got to be exciting to you. And then finally, the R is for relevant. And that means it needs to be relevant in terms of relevant to your season in life. It needs to be relevant in terms of aligned with your core values. And it needs to be relevant in the sense that it's aligned with your other goals, so you don't have competing goals that in essence sabotage one another. So that's the framework.
Well, thank you for walking through that so succinctly. Yeah. I appreciate that. When it comes to exciting, if it's not exciting, could that be evidence, Michael, that if appropriate, you could be trying to work hard on something you need to delegate to somebody else?
Totally. Okay. Totally. And the good news is the way God's made everything is that there are people, believe it or not, who actually love the things you hate. And there are people that are good at the things you're not very good at. And so I teach this in my Free to Focus course. Have you been through that course?
I have. I'm about halfway through it right now.
Okay, cool. So one of the things I talk about in there is the freedom compass, and the idea that the place where you really want to dwell and where you really want to focus is where your passion meets your proficiency. I call it the desire zone. The opposite of that is the drudgery zone, things you're not good at, things you don't enjoy, and those are things that you need to either delegate, automate, or eliminate from your life.
I remember that now. That was a nice review, having gone through that part of the
there you go.
Free to Focus course. Well, you hinted at this a moment ago. Expound on, you didn't actually call on this, but you do in the book, of course, the various zones that our goals tend to fall into and how we can avoid the extremes on either side.
Okay, so there are three zones in which you can set your goals. And one is the comfort zone. And this is where a lot of people, particularly people that work in corporations, and I say this as somebody who worked in a corporation most of my career, they tend to set goals that are in the comfort zone, goals that they are pretty confident that they can accomplish, because the risk of not accomplishing, the risk of failure they feel, or at least they perceive, is too great. So it might be incremental improvement over last year, but it's still in the comfort zone. You pretty much know how to get there. You've probably done it before, and it's just a little improvement over a prior year. That's the comfort zone. The discomfort zone is where you dial it up a few clicks, and you begin to feel these negative emotions of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Now, I see those negative emotions as positive indicators that you're in the exact right zone where you need to be. The problem is, if your goal is not in the discomfort zone, it's not going to be compelling to you. It's not going to force you to innovate. It's not going to force you to get clear and really exert enough energy to actually accomplish it. That's why people that set comfort zone goals don't usually even accomplish them, because they're not commanding enough. They're not compelling enough. So the discomfort zone is where you want it. But what you don't want to do is move into the delusional zone. So for example, if I thought to myself, I'm going to play golf on the PGA Senior Tour, that would totally, especially for anybody that's played golf with me, they would know that that's in the delusional zone. That's just not possible. So you need to dial it back so that it's, right there in the discomfort zone, but it's not causing you to hallucinate or panic or feel extraordinary fear.
Maybe like to the person who decides, well, I want to run a marathon and they hate running, or they've never run even a 5K. It's maybe you start a little smaller. Though I did,
totally.
I was challenged by one example you gave to stretch a little bit related to this. I've run a few 5Ks, and that's about as far as I've gone. And thought about a half marathon, and then went, well, no, I probably need to try a 10K first, and then work my way up to that. But something, I can't remember exactly how you put it, but something you said in the book made me want to just skip that and go right to the half marathon. I don't know if that was something you did or not, but I'm contemplating just jumping right to the half marathon and seeing how I do.
Well, you can totally do it. I mean, I did jump straight to the half marathon. I didn't run a 10K till after I'd run a half marathon. But you have to understand, though, if you do the right training program, and I highly recommend, by the way, Jeff Galloway's method of running and walking, and it's all spelled out online. But his methodology will take you incrementally from wherever you are, even if you're a couch potato, all the way to a half marathon. And you do it over time, and it's amazing what you can accomplish.
Wonderful. Well, making it happen is what Michael calls the final piece of the puzzle. Michael, if you would, talk about some of these activation triggers that can help aid us into action.
Yeah, I love this concept, Jeff. Activation triggers are kind of another way of talking about what the goal researchers call implementation intentions. And it's a way to prepare for contingencies in advance. And this really derails a lot of people because they get all excited about the goal. They don't anticipate the roadblocks or the setbacks or the challenges. And then when they happen, they get totally sidelined and they're a little bit surprised and they think this goal setting thing doesn't work and they just give up. So it's a way for preparing for contingencies in advance. So, for example, it's a little bit like if-then planning. So, for example, let's say you have a goal, and it's a habit goal that you're going to run every morning at 6 a.m. So an implementation intention or an activation trigger would say, if it's raining, then I'll drive to the gym and run on the treadmill. Or if you want to, you can kind of automate this, and this is where I distinguish between implementation intentions and activation triggers. But an activation trigger is a way to automate things so that it makes it super easy to follow through. So, for example, if you're going to, let's just take that same one, you're going to run every morning at 6 a.m. Well, it's difficult when you wake up in the morning and you're groggy and it's cold out and you can't find your tennis shoes to just kind of say, forget it. I'm not going to do it today, maybe tomorrow. But an activation trigger would be something like laying out your clothes or programming your lights to come on or something as simple as setting an alarm and putting it across the room so you get up and don't fail to do that. I've got all kinds of activation triggers. One, for example, is I have automated lighting in my office so that at 6 p.m., which is when I want to leave from the office every day, I don't want to work longer than that, my lights just turn off. Another one, I don't want to get distracted early in the morning by email or Facebook or Slack or anything else. So I've got an activation trigger, this time in the form of a computer macro that shuts down everything on my computer. And then it brings up my Kindle with my Bible reading for the day. It brings up my prayer list, and it brings up my daily journal with a new page. And those are the only three things that are open. So when I walk into the office, and my office is behind my home. So when I walk into the office to have my quiet time, I don't get distracted because nothing's running except what should be running. Those are activation triggers.
Michael, do you find that various personalities or personality differences impact phases or stages of this process? If I'm one personality type, am I going to have a easier time with one aspect than another? That sounds kind of obvious. The research you've seen, do you see an impact from that?
Yeah, it actually does, and it really speaks to the issue of motivation. Like, for example, I'm an achiever on Strength Finders. Do you know what your top strength is?
Mine is also achiever.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. We're in trouble. No. Well, like we're really motivated to achieve, right? So checking things off lists, feeling like we're making progress is really important to us. So we can let that work for us. My wife is achiever is number 33 out of 34 on her list.
Wow.
And on the Enneagram, I don't know if you're familiar with that at all. I happen to be a 3 on the Enneagram,
So
which is the achiever. Gosh, we're like mirror images here. My wife is a 9, which is the peacemaker. So goal setting doesn't really motivate her. And so for years, I tried to get her into goal setting. I said, this will change your life. You can achieve more and all this. And she's like, I don't care about that. Well, what I found was what she really cares about is prioritizing things that matter and making time for things that matter. And so she started goal setting with me when I promised her a conversation about what matters most, which is what comes out of our goal setting. And so she has done it without fail for each of the last 5 years with me. And the reason she does it is not because she wants to achieve, but because she wants to have these conversations about these things that she's put on paper that really matter to her. And so I think knowing that really helps me serve her and really helps her understand me. We're just different. That's okay.
Well, Michael, I have a couple of questions I want to touch on, if I may, in the time we have left that aren't directly related to the book. But before I do that, is there anything else from the book you want to make sure that we walk away with?
Well, the only thing I would mention, the only step we didn't cover was step 4 on motivation or key motivations. And the only thing I would say about that is it's really important when it comes to goal setting to identify your why. And the reason this is so critically important is because you're inevitably going to face that point in the race, if I can use that metaphor, where you want to quit. And for me on the half marathon, it's about mile 10 or 11, where I'm too invested to stop, but I'm not sure I got enough gas to finish. And that happens with every big project. It happens with every important goal. And you have to dig deep to know why you're doing what you're doing. So years ago when I was writing Platform Get Noticed in a Noisy World, I was super excited about the book on the front end. And that's pretty much how it is on all goals. Everybody's excited on the front end. Like running a half marathon. You're out there with 35,000 of your friends and everybody's excited and the energy's palpable. But about mile 10, mile 11, everybody's dragging. Totally different kind of race then. Well, so I'm writing the book and I got very busy. I was trying to establish my speaking career. I was very busy trying to launch my business. And it came to October. The book was due in November. I had a first draft, but it was really bad. And I was pretty discouraged. And I was about to throw up my hands and just say, I'm going to return the advance money to the publisher, I just maybe next year. But then I remembered that I had written down my key motivations. Why did I want to do this? And I looked back over that. And one of the things on my list was that I really wanted to establish my authority in the platform space. And I knew that a book would do that. Second, I really wanted to help thousands, tens of thousands if possible, platform builders, people that had something important they wanted to get out into the world but didn't have a platform and didn't know how to go about building one. And then I also wanted it to open up other opportunities for speaking and so forth. So I connected both intellectually and emotionally with those reasons. And I found the reason. Again, I reconnected with it, seeing what was at stake, and got super excited about finishing the book. Now, I was a month late turning it in, but that book changed everything. It went on to become a New York Times, Wall Street Journal, USA Today bestseller, and really launched my business in a way that nothing else could have. So the why is really important.
I'm so glad you went back to that. I meant to ask about it and I forgot. I'm sorry.
No worries.
But for me, that was revelatory to understand how to connect my motivations intellectually and emotionally. Something that understanding what my motivations are is something as silly as it sounds, I guess, in one sense, I used to never do. And I would wonder why I'm not succeeding at this goal.
I think this is a real challenge for achievers, and particularly for those of us that are Enneagram 3s. Because we tend not to dig deep on that stuff. We tend to kind of live at a superficial level, and we can just kind of, white knuckle it, and we've got unbelievable stamina until we don't. And that's where connecting with the motivation is so important.
Well, I know asking this next question might be akin to asking you to pick your favorite 2 or 3 children. But if you can think back, Michael, to the many, many, many books you've read over the years, what are the maybe 2 or 3 titles that immediately come to mind as having had the biggest impact on you? And maybe share why they impacted or how they impacted you as they did.
Wow.
Tough question.
Well, I'll tell you a book I was talking with my assistant about today that had a huge impact on me when I read it. I took my mentoring group through it. It's called The Power of Full Engagement, and it's by Jim Lohr, Loehr, and it's really about this idea of managing energy, not managing time. Another book, and these are just like in no particular order, but some of these I read this last year, so I'm very much aware of them. The Revenge of Analog, and it's how there's been this resurgence of vinyl records and physical board games and actual books. In fact, a lot of people don't know this that may not be in the publishing industry, but the prediction was that digital books would completely replace print books. Well, the truth is they got to about 25% of the market share and stalled out. In fact, it's gone backward by a few percentage points in the last few years. And it was that book that stimulated us, motivated us to produce our Full Focus Planner and Leader Box, 2 physical products that we're excited about. Just a couple of other ones. How We Got to Now by Stephen Johnson. Have you read that?
I have not. I just had somebody recommend one of his books a couple of days ago.
Oh, it's so good. It's about kind of these 5 big things in the history of man that have led us to this point now. Amazing. And another one that's similar to that was Astrophysics for People in a Hurry by Neil deGrasse Tyson. And that's a phenomenal book. I mean, that just exploded my head. And then the final one I'll mention, I just read a couple weeks ago, called Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. And the thing I loved about that is in a world that's so polarized, where people are talking over one another instead of to each other, this is a book really about having meaningful discourse, whether it's in private or in public.
I love every one of those. I don't know that any of those books have ever been recommended before. So kudos to you for that, first of all.
Thank you.
And going back to analog versus digital, I was one of those folks who back in 2000, I had one of those little handspring, personal digital assistants with a little
me too.
grayscale screen and stylus, all that. And I went digital for almost exclusively for about 15 years. And it was, I think, Lee Cockrell a couple of years ago who first got me out of that, and I went back to a day timer, but then I coupled that with a productivity planner. And I have to say that and you've probably seen me raving about this on social media, but in October I started using the Full Focus Planner. My quarter has been head and shoulders above the rest.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you.
FullFocusPlanner.com, I think, is the website, right, for that?
Yes, FullFocusPlanner.com.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you this final question. As somebody who's been able to be in an audience where you're speaking, I can vouch for your expertise at it. And so I would love for you to share, if you can, maybe a tip or two you would be willing to pass along when it comes to delivering a well-given public talk.
A couple things I would say. First of all, I still do quite a bit of speaking, usually now at my own events. We do about 10 events of our own in Nashville every year. And I would say, without question, the best methodology that I've ever encountered, the best conference that I've ever attended on speaking, is the SCORE conference. Have you been to that?
I have not, though I wanted to get to, I think there was a one-day Nashville version in October, and I missed it.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. In fact, I sent several of my people to that. Ken Davis is the originator of that program. It's SCORE conference, and SCORE with 2 R's. SCORE is an acronym. But I used to be a partner with Ken in that conference, and then my own business kind of took me away from that. But I would still say that's without question the best preparation for public speaking you can probably get. The one day is good, but the 4-day one is phenomenal because you have to give 4 speeches, and you've got a coach that works with you, and you'll be astonished at how much you can improve. The other tip I would give, and by the way, I think their website is scoreconference.tv. And if it's not that, you can correct it in the show notes. But then in terms of, I think that the biggest breakthrough I ever had in speaking is that, like most people, I would get really nervous before I would stand up and speak. And sometimes almost debilitatingly so, until I kind of reframed that fear and started saying to myself, oh, this is my body's way of preparing me for peak performance. And once I started processing it like that, then I welcomed the adrenaline and I realized that it would help me, that I would have greater clarity, that I would have greater impact. And then I would say the final tip is when I stopped thinking about myself. You know, what are they going to think about me? Will they like what I have to share? Is this going to be helpful? Instead, I started thinking about them and really focusing on them. What are they struggling with? How can I be helpful? You know, how can I make this more clear so that they can get a transformative result? Once I put the focus on them and stopped thinking about myself, a lot of good things happened.
I find that when I'm able to channel that fear that way, as you described, when I get to the end and it's over, there's sort of this natural high that I feel. I'm just on top of the world when I get through something that I was scared initially to do, and I can't wait to do it again.
So true. Yeah, me too.
Michael, thank you again for being here. This was indeed a delight. I feel like that's such an understatement because it's something I've been looking forward to for a long time. This has been a 4.5-year journey to get you here, and I can say it was definitely worth the wait.
Well, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for all you do.
Links to all the resources we talked about, including Michael's Full Focus Planner, his website, and the books that he recommended, can be found at the show notes page that I've created especially for this episode. You'll find that at readtoleadpodcast.com/196 for episode 196. Thanks again to our sponsors making this episode possible. FreshBooks, with a free 30-day trial available to you, no obligation, and access to 100% of FreshBooks features free for 30 days. Go to freshbooks.com/read-to-lead and enter Read to Lead in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Thanks also to Gusto, a refreshingly easy payroll, benefits, and HR solution for the modern small business, where you no longer have to be a big company to get great technology, great benefits, and great service to take care of your team. Sign up today and you get 3 months free once you run your first payroll. Just go to gusto.com/read-to-lead. You know, you may not know this, but I'm a big believer in the impact that reading and books can have on your life and business. If you'd like to join me and other members in reading a book a month and coming together at the end of the month to dig into that book a little deeper, face to face, at least virtually anyway, then check out Read to Lead University at readtoleaduniversity.com. If you happen to be looking for another great podcast to check out in 2018, you might try the Igniting Souls podcast, hosted by my friend Carrie, with a K, Oberbrunner. You can find out more about that one at ignitingSouls.com. Well, that's going to do it for this week. I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, remember, leaders read and readers lead.